how do we then modify the therapeutic approach so that it does meet autistic needs? The National Autistic Society did a survey. From the results of their survey, they said that they wanted the design and delivery of therapy to be modified to suit autistic need. So I'm doing this video for therapists who are interested, potential clients as well. Maybe you, the viewer, if you're a potential client and you're thinking of going into therapy, you might like to know about what is neuro-affirming therapy. Why might you want to have it? How can you know whether it is or isn't neuro-affirming? Hi, welcome to the channel and welcome to this playlist. This is a series of videos all broadly about one subject. And we're covering in this subject a series of videos about neuro-affirming therapy. Each video in this playlist has a different focus, a different topic, subject matter, if you like, within the broader theme of understanding what neuro-affirming therapy is. So am I qualified to talk to you about this? Well, yeah, I believe I am. As I said, my name is Vauna Beauvais. And I'm a psychotherapist and a coach, and I've been seeing clients for 25 years. I'm autistic myself, and I didn't know that as a child that I was autistic. I found out when I was over 40, and I'm also an ADHDer. I'm a trainer here at Vanguard Neurodiversity Training. And I offer clinical supervision for other therapists working with neurodivergent clients, whether they themselves as therapists and as people are or are not neurodivergent themselves. So first of all, you'll find that, let's frame this a little. You'll find that I talk a lot about people that are autistic. A lot, really, more than other types of being neurodivergent. As a psychotherapist, there's a lot of clients who are autistic. I think that's different for coaching sessions. In my experience, coaching tends to attract more ADHDers and some autistic people. Whereas in therapy, my clients tend to be autistic people. I only work with neurodivergent people these days, for about the last 5 years. And those autistic people, yes, they may be autistic, but they might also have other neurodivergent experiences as well. For example, they might be an ADHDer. They may be dyslexic or dyscalculia or epilepsy. So that's why, because of the volume of clients that I see that are autistic, adults, and actually from what I've heard from other therapists that I know that work with neurodivergent clients, that knowing about autism, understanding autistic people is really important. And so that's why I might refer to autistic people in my discussions a lot here. I'm certainly not equating autism with neurodiversity as if they mean the same thing. So I'll specify specify autistic if I do mean that, and say neurodivergent if I mean more broadly neurodivergent people. So what we're not going to talk about, certainly at first in this video, is about sensory and communication modifications to therapy. Because, Yawnsville, you do often see that written about, therapists should modify therapy according to clients' sensory sensibilities and communication preferences. Well, if you can, that's really great, but it's not really what therapy is all about. It's creating the basics for therapy to be accessible, to be thinking about and mindful of neurodivergent or autistic clients' communication preferences and sensory sensitivities potentially, but I think just if you're working in person as a therapist, you think about basic needs anyway, whatever kind of client group that you are working with. You're working with human beings and you want your clients to be able to have access to toilets. Maybe ideally be thinking about, a separate entrance if you can, a waiting room that's private. You'd have chairs in your therapy room that are adult sized. And you'd ensure that you'd got disabled access to the building wherever possible, if you're in control of that with the access to the building, or you'd clearly state in your blurb that you don't have that. And to me, that's sort of treating clients as human beings with needs, and you're informing them about what's on offer, what's available, how they can access you or not access you. They can sort of assess that themselves. They can make an informed choice about whether coming to see you is accessible or whether there is a barrier to access for that person with their needs and with what they find challenging. I've heard some therapists talk about the fact that having, say, stim toys, I haven't got any on my desk at the moment, actually, otherwise I'd hold one up and show you, but I have got these wiggly kind of jelly kind of snake things that I bought just to see whether I'd like them. I don't overly personally like them, prefer to twiddle my glasses, my pens, doodle, move my bits of paper around on the desk, and I've got like a pad on the desk that's a protector that stops me ruining my lovely white surface. So I sometimes slide that about and things like that. So I do fiddle with things, and I sometimes hold the mouse or tap the mouse, for the computer. And they are objects that I can use for stimming purposes. So yeah, if you have stimming toys in the therapy room, that's fine. That's up to you, but I think to hear it saying that it's essential is a bit misleading, really. I think it's permissive. Because why is that? Because it's showing openly that stimming is normal and that a person might find that comfortable or find ways of communicating or registering certain states of being or feelings by grabbing hold of stim toys. It can tell you a lot as a person who is the person who's stimming, rather than the therapist sort of saying, oh, you're doing the stimming, so that means this or that. It's not necessarily about that. But I think it's nice that therapists might have taken the time and care to provide objects to use if required. But also it's okay for clients to, be able to think for themselves and bring their own things if they want. It's like tissues, clients can bring their own, but it's probably nice if you provide them, and like a jug of water. These days people walk around, don't they, with, I've got my little one here, but they were like those bottle container things that don't tip over and spill out, with a straw in or a drinking thing on the top, and people do walk around with those, so it's not unlikely that a client would have their own drink as they're coming into the therapy room. But having a jug of water in your room might be something that you as a therapist want to do. There's no fixed rule there, really. I think if you're getting to believing that all therapy has to do, though, is provide stim toys for autistic adults, or that they're not that means that they're not accommodating autistic needs, I think it's missing the point, and it could actually convey an infantilizing or patronizing attitude about autistic adults. That's my view. It depends on what kind of client group you attract and what kind of therapy you do, as to whether it's one of the choices that therapists make, isn't it, in creating the environment, their therapy room, the place where they're going to be, conducting their therapy sessions. Excuse me. Therapists make those kinds of choices about, like, furnishings and art. These are things that get displayed. These are things that the client encounters, and a therapist makes choices about how and what they will provide in a room for their therapy sessions. Likewise with stim toys, I think it's the same category of thing. I actually don't have a therapy room anymore. I did for about the first 20 years. But at the start of COVID, you might know that all therapists started using Zoom and seeing clients online when we were all locked down and we couldn't see people in person. before then, online sessions weren't commonly offered, actually. They were on offer by some therapists, but a small amount of people, a small amount of therapists were using video conferencing platforms and doing therapy online. There's a few reasons for that. I think two of the things that spring to mind is that, firstly, specialist training actually was required to be able to work ethically online. That was the thinking around that. And I think the other thing is that with a lot of people in our profession, they're thinking that working online isn't really therapy because you're not really together. You're virtually together, you're not really together in a room. So you have like a pseudo togetherness. Obviously that view was challenged, wasn't it? Once everyone was plunged into the position of themselves doing online video conferencing sessions with their clients. And the membership bodies, certainly in the UK, such as the BACP and the UKCP, they sort of put out like memos or broadcasts, declaring their position on that. And they took the position that even though it's quite necessary to have specific training to work online with clients, because in fact there are differences in the way that you do share the presence of each other. We're very used to it, of course, because we do use screens, video, WhatsApp video, messages on your phone and on your computer. We use it a lot now, and we've sort of forgotten that there is a difference in the type and quality of presence together, or the way that you experience each other. But they were saying, well, yes, at that time they were saying it is different, and specialist training really is. They didn't just say it was useful. They did at the time say that it was necessary. And in fact, there was a 30-hour course was given out by the Online Therapy Institute. Kate gave that out to serve the community, so that you could at least have some preliminary training in working online and understanding computer-mediated sessions. But going back to that, so even though in those days training was required, the membership bodies said during these unprecedented times, can you remember that phrase? Everything was unprecedented. We were in unprecedented times. The therapist, we weren't allowed to congregate, were we? We weren't allowed to meet in person. And what they were saying was that it was harmful to just disappear and abandon clients, of course. So working online or on the phone was a way to still stay attached, to be available to clients, who, of course, as well, might have been additionally impacted by the COVID situation, as well as what they'd first come to therapy about. I know that some of my clients at the time couldn't have their sessions online. They couldn't switch to online sessions due to having no space and privacy at home. Like kids were off school, weren't they, and things like that. And they weren't a person that usually worked at home, so they didn't have the facilities. Some people sat in their car because it was summer, at the time, and it became the norm for a short while to work online with clients, to use video, to use telephone. But now we're sort of through that era, really, and therapists are working in person again, and some have continued to work online. And some therapists do both. They work online and in person. At that time, I decided to take up the specialist training. So I got the cyber therapy qualification from the Online Therapy Institute with Deanna Nagal, and decided I'd work online from now on. I really liked it, and I was interested in what it was all about. Now, the good thing about that is, as it happens, is that because I only work with neurodivergent clients now, more or less just started to do that before COVID hit, about a year before, clients and supervisees now, it means that I can be available for people who need someone who works a lot with neurodivergent people and who knows a lot about neurodiversity, and maybe someone who is neurodivergent themselves. I can be available to people, therapists, clients, supervisees, from a wide geographical area because I work online. I'm not limited to only working with those who are close enough to get to see me in person, to travel or drive. So, what we will talk today, I'm coming right back around to what we're talking about today, is how do we then modify the therapeutic approach so that it does meet autistic needs? The National Autistic Society did a survey, I think it was 2018-ish, 2019, I can't quite remember. And they said that from the results of their survey, they said that they interviewed autistic adults about mental health, well-being, and about therapy. And what they wanted was a therapist that was knowledgeable about autism, and that they said that they wanted the design and delivery of therapy to be modified to suit autistic need, and that is ethical, isn't it? So I'm doing this video to distribute freely the information that I know, the insights I've gained, for therapists who are interested, in this, and for their own practice or for their own, for themselves, therapists or clients as well, to help potential clients as well. Maybe you, the viewer, if you're a potential client and you're thinking of going into therapy, you might like to know about what is neuro-affirming therapy. Why might you want to have it? How can you know whether it is or isn't neuro-affirming? Not all therapy is the same. As you probably know, there are different models and concepts about what therapy is about. But the therapist's positionality in regard to neurodiversity will shape how the therapy is, not just what kind of therapy it is or what the underpinning principles, but its effectiveness and appropriateness for neurodivergent clients. So regardless of what model of therapy the therapist is training in or has trained in, or the amount of qualifications or expertise that therapist has, it still may or may not be neuro-affirming. So hopefully going through these videos, you'll gain a sense of, apart from intuitively knowing for yourself, but you might get more clarity and more conscious awareness of what neuro-affirming therapy is, and hopefully some points that you'd never thought about before. So let's take a step then into understanding what is neuro-affirming therapy or neuro-affirmative therapy. It's a therapeutic approach. It's not a model of therapy. I was talking about the modalities, like we think of person-centered, like the Rogerian or transactional analysis, Gestalt, cognitive behavior therapy, narrative therapy, or psychodynamic. These are some common modalities that you might have heard of, and there are lots and lots more. Neuro-affirming therapy isn't a model of therapy, well, yet, although that might change, I suppose. It might evolve and be made into a distinct model of therapy eventually. But at the moment, we can say that neuro-affirming therapy is a therapeutic approach, and it transcends a therapist's underpinning model of therapy if they only use one or a cluster of them. So neuro-affirming therapy, it's based on certain fundamentals as I see it, and let's say for now two fundamental components to start us off. So we're talking about therapy that embraces and validates neurodiversity, or a therapist who embraces and validates neurodiversity, and that the therapy that you experience with that therapist is actually therapeutic for neurodivergent people. So neuroaffirming therapy embraces and validates neurodiversity. And it's not just the validations part, but it's actually therapeutic for neurodivergent people as well. So, of course, this approach to therapy is grounded in the neurodiversity paradigm. And the neurodiversity paradigm refers to neurological differences such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, as we've said, and these are natural variations in human neurology rather than that they are disorders that need to be cured or fixed or changed. You can read a lot about the neurodiversity paradigm on the internet. One of my favorite things that I came across on the internet about it was in the Psychiatric Times. It comes up high on Google if you search for the neurodiversity paradigm, and it's an interview. It's a transcript of an interview where Robert Chapman, an autistic person who's a philosopher, is being interviewed. Lovely article. It really explains it very well. So, okay. So if neuroaffirming therapy is grounded in the neurodiversity paradigm, what does it mean then for psychotherapy then? So I thought about starting us off because it means a lot of things about psychotherapy, but let's start with acceptance for today's topic. I think we need to be sure that there's more than just a statement of, well, I do accept that there are people with all different neurotypes, and having neurodivergent people in the world is part of natural human diversity. I think it's a good start for a person, a therapist, to be on board with that. And many therapists are now. You know, they've got the memo, so to speak. They understand that that's a thing, and you know, a lot of people are saying, "Yeah, I get it. It's part of natural human diversity." So, where's the problem if everyone thinks that? Well, the context of neuroaffirming therapy, we're talking about acceptance that goes far beyond merely the acknowledgement of neurological difference and the naturalness of that variation amongst humans. We're talking about it being a profound shift in perspective. You know, that's why it's the neurodiversity paradigm. It's a whole different way, a shift in perspective, a different way of thinking about it. Not just uttering words, a mind shift, a mindset shift, you could say, I suppose. How do you get there? How do you get there? How do you shift your mindset rather than just saying the thing? Examining the concept, making meanings, seeing how that's enacted in real life among real people, reflecting, you know, so a therapist could notice their reactions when they're interacting with a neurodivergent client, and they might listen out for their own ingrained notions of what constitutes normal human behavior, conditioned beliefs that they, as the therapist, are holding about why do they think that that's normal? Because if this neurodivergent client is expressing or holding something different, then am I saying that that client is not normal? And then we're like, oh, well, I thought all neurodivergent people were normal. It's a normal and natural variation of humans. So we start to get into the weeds there, don't we, when you start questioning things like that in that way. So true acceptance involves recognizing neurological differences as an integral part of natural human diversity. And that means that the human race wouldn't be complete without the neurodivergent folks. And it means that the existence of neurodivergent people is something not out there in theory, but something that you'll encounter. You know, you will encounter neurodivergent people in your work as a therapist. You're encountering one now, me. And this variation among humans that we're talking about, you know, well, how different is different? Let's go there. And so unless you've spent time with neurodivergent adults lately. And I say lately, and I mean very much lately, like the last 5 years or so. You're noticing difference in that you're having interpersonal encounters with some people that could go beyond the familiar patterns that you know from the people that you've grown accustomed to in your professional, personal life. So let's say we're talking about somebody growing up in the global north in a suburban neighborhood. And in your local community, each individual might seem to be unique. Well, they are unique, aren't they? They have their own quirks and characteristics. Each person is an individual being, even though they're part of the community, they're part of the locality and the neighborhood. So let's say then that you relocate, you move to a big city, or you relocate entirely to a different country with a different culture, or a different area entirely, where things are different, where people are different. We broaden our perspective, don't we? We're meeting people that weren't like those people that we knew before, even though everyone's unique. There was something sameness about them in retrospective realization. What we once perceived as a wide spectrum of diversity before, of all people being different and unique, you now can realize, in fact, was a relatively homogenous sample of people. Now that you've got a wider view and you're open to more diversity in different ways. So I think that this realization does illustrate something, that our perception of normal is often shaped by our immediate environment and our experiences. So what seems diverse in one context might appear uniform when viewed from a broader perspective. So you might think, oh yeah, all those people in my hometown, none of them ever went to London, or they'd used to go on a day trip for one, few times a year to the theatre. It was like a big special event. And that was very common amongst those people. So I can see that there's a sameness in that around the attitudes or the beliefs or the behaviors around that. And yet, if I move somewhere else where people might nip in and out of London, I'm talking from experience here. I actually moved somewhere close to London, very fast access into London. And yet before where I'd lived, where I'd been brought up as a child, people didn't go to London. They just didn't. But now I can nip into London for a morning if I want to, or an afternoon, and people around here do. Generally speaking, it's part of the culture. So diverse can be uniform when viewed from a broader perspective. It's easy, isn't it? And I think natural for people, including therapists, to fall into the trap of considering that their familiar experiences, their frame of reference of seeing the world or knowing what people are or what human beings are, is like a baseline reality for normal human experience, or for human drives, for human needs, for human beliefs. Of course, this is what we're getting at with an unconscious bias, really, isn't it? Where we're saying, it's not what you consciously think or believe, but it's something maybe held out of awareness, an unconsciously held reality that informs you, because it's held unconsciously. It still informs you that anything deviating from the familiar pattern that you know as normal, or you have classified in your mind as normal, anything different to that, you may have an alternative classification of different, or alien, or foreign, or even bad or wrong. You might put value judgments on it, even though you might not be consciously aware of what they are. We carry those things unconsciously. We all do that. So encountering people who aren't representative of those from your template of normal, for example, an autistic adult in the therapy room, that may cause discomfort at times, because some of the things that the autistic person might believe or say as their truths don't fit your pattern. And in a well-meaning kind of way, you want to put them right. Right being the normal that's right for you, which you're believing is right or you're believing is healthy for everyone. And you care about your client, so you want what's healthy for everyone, including your client. But it's your definition, it's your construct of normal, healthy, and right. You wouldn't be embodying beliefs of the neurodiversity paradigm in that moment, even if you believe in it overall, because of you being, assuming that there's one normal and one way to be right and healthy, and consciously biased toward that as a reality. It's subtle, isn't it? Maybe 3 points to grasp here. Some unconsciously held beliefs are not neuro-affirming. Let's just get that out on the table. And assuming that common neurotypical ways are universal norms, that's one of the things. Interpreting neurodivergent ways of being through a neuromajority lens rather than a neurodiversity lens is another thing. And then unconsciously using your own framework when considering the desires, needs, and models of self-expression of people and using your own instead. And so then you're making an assessment where the client's needs, desires, and modes of expression are normal and healthy. So we've got the assumptions, the interpretation, and then making assessments based on those. And I think that's what we're getting down to when we talk about positionality. It's where therapists are positioned in terms of neurodiversity. We can ask, do they recognize, does this therapist, does this person recognize that there are differences between the neuro majority and a neuro minority, such as neurodivergent people, such as autistic adults? Can they recognize that there could be differences between them? Or they're not just saying, oh, we're all a bit autistic. These are real differences, and it's important to give credit to that. But could they recognize that there are differences and that their own norms and assumptions and those of their neurodivergent client might not be the same? And are they able to hold both as equally valid? And finally, are they putting in the work, to see that their own biases? So when they're presented with the client's reality, can they hold open to scrutiny, really, and reflection, not necessarily right in the moment when they're with you in the session, although they might, but we do work outside of session as well, and we reflect on things and we talk about them in clinical supervision and in other ways. Are they holding those and opening things up? Are they looking at their judgments, exploring them, examining them, and saying to themselves, hearing this client say how they were explaining this thing that they were talking about, I can get a feel of how that's normal for them, or how that's a good thing for them, or how that's healthy for them, even though I didn't think of that before when just using my own framework, and it might not be a good thing for me. So I think this might be a good time for me to delve into and declare my own positionality. We're talking about the positionality of a therapist, aren't we? So it may not come to any surprise to you, of course, as you know a little bit about me now, but I am a psychotherapist myself and an autistic adult, as I've already said, and a client. As a therapist, I had 40 hours therapy per year as per the UKCP requirements when you're working toward accreditation, toward UKCP registration. For 7 years, I had 40 hours of therapy a year. Different membership bodies have different rules about it, but usually, we're talking about therapists having their own therapy as part of the route for accreditation, which I did. And I've gone on and gone back and had therapy on and off as I felt the need over the years as well. So maybe I'm all the things. I'm an autistic adult, I'm a client, and I'm a therapist. And now I'm a trainer of therapists and a consultant to therapists. So my positionality is that I want autistic adults. I want autistic adults to feel safe in therapy. Number one. That is number one for me. I want autistic adults to feel safe, that they as a person are allowed to exist and be separate from the therapist, maybe even different from the therapist, maybe not so different, but that they are allowed to exist as an autistic person, as a neurodivergent person, as a client. They are allowed to exist and be different, be separate from the therapist, and that doesn't get in the way of joining together with the therapist to work toward improved mental health and well-being for them. You know, it's not conditional that they give up part of themselves or compromise themselves to be able to have that. The other thing is that I hold the positionality of neither completely the social model of disability nor the medical model of disability. Both do have interesting things to say, and I think if held lightly, they can be useful rather than like taken on as a doctrine. So, but if we're getting specific here, I'd probably say that I would say that I'm positioned in the biopsychosocial model personally. But whatever, I am a psychotherapist, and there was a time, you know, that I'm going to disclose something here. There was a time that I felt very disappointed and I felt very hurt myself by the whole industry of therapy, the whole ideology, the processes of psychotherapy. Maybe I might talk about that one of these days. I might do. I've done a lot of reflecting on it, a lot of thinking through. I think I've worked a lot of it through. I was in a bad place about it at one point, like a impasse, but I've moved through somewhat, and I've arrived at a position at the moment of caring a lot about our profession again and wanting its survival. I know that a lot of neurodivergent people, especially autistic people, and I hear this every week from clients out of their own mouths, that they've been harmed by therapy because it wasn't appropriate. It didn't meet their autistic needs. It wasn't neuro-affirming, you see. And so it just wasn't therapeutic. Although it might have been comforting or supportive in ways, you know, it might have been. It would, you know, it has been. I've heard that it has been comforting and supportive in some ways, or had specific spot benefits for people. You know, they've come and got what the clients have come and ended up thinking, oh, well, I'll take what I can from this then. But overall, it's not been neuro-affirming therapy, and actually sometimes been quite distressing or disturbing. We will go into that in a whole big video, maybe more than one, because there's a lot to say about that. But I won't waffle on about that just at the moment. I'm talking about autistic adults throughout this video and really throughout the whole playlist in two ways. We're talking about adults who knew that they were autistic when they went into therapy, and those that didn't know then that they were autistic. So a lot of those clients, especially masked autistic people, did not fully recognize. Of course they didn't, you know, by definition of being masked. They didn't realize at the time that they were being harmed, or if they did, that they just felt that they didn't have any other option. You know, this was therapy. This is therapy. It's like, well, this is society. What can you do? Nowadays, autistic adults do know a lot more. about whether therapy is appropriate and beneficial and whether it supports thriving and growth for them. And what I care about is that autistic adults don't have to spend a lot of time and money on therapy that isn't helpful at best or is harmful. So my positionality is that I really care about autistic adults who become clients in therapy, not just my clients, or all clients. They go into therapy and recognize the vulnerable position that they have to go into. They're going into therapy in the hope that they do get a therapeutic experience and a good outcome. So for me, I feel very strongly that autistic adults should be able to make an informed choice about what they're buying as well, or what they're accessing, what they're selecting. If they're accessing therapy privately, they may be buying it, they may be paying, not always, depends. But regardless, the transaction between the two parties, the client and therapist, the client choosing a therapist or choosing to have therapy, they're investing. It might not be paying, but they're investing, and they might be paying, but they're investing in many ways, their time, their commitment, their hope. They're hoping, they're investing a lot of hope, that therapy will work for them, that'll bring good things, that will help. So I'd rather that clients could be getting what it says on the tin. So if you're not a neurodiversity affirming therapist, that's okay. You're allowed to have your own positionality, aren't you? For any reason that you've examined it through and decided that that's not your positionality, or you're partway through, or you haven't gone there yet, that's okay. But say so. I'd rather you say so. Let potential autistic clients know, so that they won't choose you, or if they do, they know that they're choosing and what they're choosing somewhat. And if you are neuro-affirming, then therapists could declare with as much accuracy as possible. In gender, sex, and relationship therapy, it's GSRT, isn't it? It's common practice to declare by degrees a therapist's involvement with the subject matter, with their expertise, with the amount that they've explored around those issues, and so on. So a therapist might say in their blurb, which after all is created to attract clients to select their services, they might state that they are sex positive, for example, or BDSM friendly, or they might say that they are kink aware or kink knowledgeable. So they're letting clients know how much, how familiar they are, how much they know, and how much they may have explored these areas of selfhood in themselves. They're letting potential clients know this, so that the clients can select, based on how important it feels to that client, or that the client can sort of guess or estimate how much of their therapy may rely on a therapist deeply knowing or understanding these elements of human life experiences. Then they can select a therapist accordingly. And that's all I expect. That's my positionality. I'd like the client to be able to choose whether to invest in any particular therapist, and that they know how to make that choice. That would be what I believe in. What I would also like to see is therapists doing the same with neurodiversity, really. So I know at the moment that something does get stated in the blurb. But it seems to me like it's binary at the moment. You do get autistic or neurodivergent therapists will state that they are autistic or they have lived experience. And they say that in their blurb often to distinguish themselves from therapists who aren't neurodivergent, who aren't autistic people themselves. I don't think this is the same thing as the declarations that have become reasonably commonplace among the therapists working with gender, sex, and relationship issues. Because you're not declaring degrees, or you're not declaring knowledge or familiarity with realms of human existence. In my view, it's not the same. It's a bit like the I'm an autistic therapist, I'm not, I have lived experience. It seems a bit us and them-ish to me. The haves and the have-nots will have the lived experience, don't have the lived experience. I feel uncomfortable about that, really. Going back to the sexuality realm for a moment, therapists could have their own sexuality and lifestyle as a kinkster themselves, but they may not have expertise in thinking through psychology, human pain, problems of the human condition explored and analysed through that lens. They might have sexuality themselves, and they may have chosen a lifestyle or be living out a lifestyle where expression of that sexuality is part of how they live. It's a good thing in that, if they are saying that declaring that in their blurb, that they have lived experience, if you like, that can make that, certain norms and concepts would be known about, rather than the client having to explain certain things to the therapist. There might be a sense of a shared body of knowledge about things or shared beliefs. Maybe the client could make a safe-ish assumption that the therapist wouldn't pathologize their sexuality or panic or claim that it was wrong, bad, or harmful if they were doing certain activities, for example, or making certain choices. But is lived experience everything? What about expertise? We are actually psychotherapists. We're not support workers. We're not simply support workers. You might not agree yourself, but it's my positionality. I believe autistic and other neurodivergent people do need therapy that's designed and delivers in ways to meet them, and that not many therapists at the moment do know what that is. And I believe that therapists giving more than support or comfort, I believe in that. I believe in the expertise, and that psychotherapists and counsellors build up over years of work, actively learning more, reflecting, deepening their knowledge and craft or their artful ways of bringing about better mental health and well-being for that client through therapeutic conversations and relationships. And I don't think that we should lose sight of that. It's important to acknowledge the professionalism and the devotion to the work that a lot of psychotherapists and counsellors do have, and that they themselves have invested in. They've invested time and money, and effort, and sometimes a lot of discomfort, pain, analysing stuff in themselves to accumulate this over the years. So I absolutely love it when we talk amongst ourselves, when therapists talk to each other, when we have the discussions done within an appropriate framework, including confidentiality and professionalism, expectations and so on, which could be like a formal training course or clinical supervision talks with their supervisor or peer group discussions, all of that. You don't just take things in as information. You don't just reflect on it on your own, but actually talking about it, interacting with other people about it. It deepens understanding, it deepens what we know and how we think, and helps us develop and grow and thrive ourselves as therapists, which is part of one of the joys of being a therapist, actually. During my own training sessions that I run through Vanguard Neurodiversity training, the best part, the very best part, it's not that I get to talk and introduce colleagues to impactful and, hopefully impactful, amazing and useful information about working with neurodivergent clients, and drawn from all over, from informal and formal sources, multimedia, client work, everything. Although that is a part of what I do get excited about. But what I love most is when we then discuss the materials after the presentation, after what I've presented, and we talk about it, colleagues together, and we make meanings together, bring in different angles, we start to get curious and query things. I love it. And the last time that we ran our certificate course, I came out of that course transformed. I'd been impacted at a deep level, and I wasn't expecting that, because of course I knew what was in the course, didn't I? But the discussions, I didn't know what was going to happen there, what would be said, or what would be realized, by myself, or questioned. And if you're thinking about it, doing any training in neurodivergent client work, I'd invite you to take a look at us at Vanguard Neurodiversity Training. And if you think you might be interested, get in touch and we can have a chat about whether, what we offer meets your professional needs or the direction that you'd like to go in. We're all of us in society, and all therapists, we're all learning about therapy all the time. We're all learning about neurodivergent people, particularly. We're on a steep learning curve about that. And mix the two together, neurodivergent people and therapeutic work with neurodivergent people, genuinely therapeutic work. We're all at different stages in this learning and at different positions about it. We're all learning, me too, and it's good to get together and help ourselves to be supported and to grow, and it's good to help each other. So we were talking a moment ago, before I went into telling you about my own positionality, my own beliefs, and what I think is really important about it, and why, and where I'm coming from on this whole thing, and why I'm broadcasting this out now, is that encountering difference in others, that can provoke discomfort. That's the point we got to. And I don't think that being ashamed about it is useful. This discomfort is not normal. It's to feel uncomfortable about unfamiliarity, about having their own frameworks, their own schemas confronted. That's normal to feel uncomfortable about that, to feel maybe threatened about that. And being aware of your own process at such times can be something really useful, can't it? So as a therapist, you can recognize this discomfort as an opportunity for growth, asking questions of yourself, an attitude of curiosity. Oh, that's interesting. Being prompted by your own discomfort to know that there's something that you could examine, that can tell you more about not just your own belief systems, but also what's going on in how those belief systems are relevant to what's going on in the therapy with the client, rather than picking up the signal of discomfort or threat and squishing it down, or discounting the significance of it. We all, of course, do that. We're not like some perfect super duper being, are we? We're all human beings. But it's something that you can train yourself to do more. It's something you can grow into more. You can develop the capacity for self-awareness more and more, and noticing in the moment and picking up signals and engaging with the significance of them, rather than missing opportunities to see something. And then, of course, what happens is that you retreat back to the familiar if you do that, don't you? So, we're talking then about understanding is crucial, understanding that the neurodiversity paradigm, but it must be paired with authentic acceptance for neurodiversity, neuro-affirming therapy to be effective. This is only one element of how neuro-affirming therapy is effective. Authentic acceptance. It goes beyond the tolerance, the mere accommodating, the idea, but involves genuinely valuing and embracing neurodiversity, and knowing that neurodivergent people have not only got entitlement to equality and equity, but that all neurodivergent people are equal to you and what you can have and what you get to say and what entitlements you've got. So I think that's all for now, probably. It feels like I've talked for a long time, and I've discussed a lot, raised a lot of points. I hope it's been worth it for you to be with me here. I know that I can certainly share that I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm being listened to. I like that. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you. So in the next video, I think I'll talk about some more ways that therapists can gain insight into their unconscious biases with some specific illustrations. But also moving on from that, I think it's important to say that not all biases, of course, our negativity towards neurodivergent people is due to unconscious bias. It's also worth us talking about consciously held values and views and the actions and decisions that therapists make that may or may not be actually neuro-affirming based on what they consciously know, what they consciously believe, what they consciously value, and how they consciously view things. So we'll talk more about that next time. And remember, we're all in our different degrees of learning and exploring, examining, thinking about neurodiversity and neuro-affirming therapy and the work that we're doing. We're all at different stages of this. So there's no wrong, there's no bad. We're just here to talk about it together. So until then, bye for now. I'm Vauna Beauvais, an autistic person, psychotherapist, coach, trainer, and supervisor. This channel is called Vanguard Neurodiversity Training because that's the name of the training company. And this playlist is called Understanding Neuro-Affirming Therapy. And this one is a series of videos in that playlist. And it's all in that one playlist. So if you like this stuff, that's where you'll find more of it. Thanks.